What's up, everyone? I'm Logan with 89 Auto Works, and today we're working on the Rocket Wagon again. So to start off, I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a backstory on what we're doing today. So this car, we took it up. It's a complete project, finished up here, and we took it to get tuned. And we put down some good horsepower. We were getting up into the low 400s. We at one point hit 420, and making good horsepower. We were experiencing detonation on this tune, and we were trying to dial in exactly what that was, and on a tuning perspective, it was not actually coming from the tune is what we had diagnosed it down to. The car originally had a Grimspeed air oil separator on it, which is a pretty simple unit. It is far more simple than what we're going to be putting on this car. It basically just vents everything back into the oil fill and separates it that way. So the biggest problem with this specific AOS that's on this car is it only has one vent that goes to the turbo inlet, versus others that we are going to talk about today, like the IAG unit, actually has two vents that go back to the turbo inlet, and that in turn gives it more positive pressure in the inside of the system. And obviously the IAG unit has a ton more stuff going on. It's not just that at all. That's just one of the big features here that is a big plus for this car especially. So we're going to talk today about basically what we're going to be doing and what you have to do for a 2002 WRX to mount the IAG AOS. We're going to do the V3 Street, and yeah, it's going to be a good setup on this car, and there's some things you got to do for an 02 WRX, and even more so for our car. We're going to run into the problem of having the Mishimoto intercooler on here and having to actually relocate some stuff. So we're going to jump down to the engine bay, and I'm going to show you guys more or less what we have going on here and what I've done so far. Alright guys, so here we have the engine bay of the Rocket Wagon, and you can see I pulled the intercooler off at this point, and the only other thing I've pulled off is actually the cruise control module that would sit right here. You have to remove that to be able to mount the AOS. You probably could make a custom bracket to make it fit, but the problem I'm running into is with the Mishimoto intercooler, we have this big pipe here, and you can't really fit a the AOS that we're trying to fit in there nicely with that pipe there and the cruise control and all that. So we are going to have to relocate the cruise control. I'm looking at possibly doing something over here with the cruise control so that we can retain cruise control. This is the Grimspeed unit we have here. It's it works great for stuff that does not make big horsepower. Honestly, if you're going to be in the 300s, you'd probably be fine with this unit. And, it just runs, and you have one vent going into the turbo inlet, and then you have one vent that goes down to your normal drain location. And then, this one here has both of the vents coming in and tees into it. One from that side, one from that side, and I have a T stuffed right there that goes down and vents to here. So, yeah, it's a fine unit for something that is a lot more simple than what we're dealing with here. And that's why we're going to be replacing it. So we're going to be replacing it mainly because the issues we were having with the detonation, we traced back to this air oil separator is we were pushing it past its efficiency point, and we ended up getting oil into our intake and our intake track. So we basically have to get rid of that. And the whole thing with the oil is when you have oil in your intake track, it changes the octane rating. So you start having knock problems. Obviously, it lowers your octane rating. So you start having knock problems. So we need to get the oil out of the air. And basically, that's what we're going to be doing today. So I'll show you guys the next step that we're going to be looking at. And I think the best thing to do at this point would be go jump over at the box and take a look at what we have going on over there. Opening the box, you guys, we have a bunch of different fittings here. Plethora of zip ties, small section of hose there, a couple freshies, some spring clamps, another fitting. And then as far as the AOS itself goes, it is a large unit. It is a big piece of equipment here, and there's a reason why. It definitely is a far more efficient unit than what we've been using. Also, we got a bracket. So then as far as hoses go, they send you a bunch of different sections of hose, and all of them have a purpose, and all of them have a home. And it's important to more or less go through these things when you first get them and make sure you have the correct different sections of hoses. You have all the parts and pieces that are needed. You have heat shield here, 3 different sections, 3 different purposes, and that's it. They don't send you directions. They don't send you anything as far as useful information goes. They don't send you anything, and there's a good reason why. But everything is on their website. You can go get a PDF of anything. It's pretty simple as far as directions go. You just got to be able to use your phone or a printer to print them out. And I will say there's like 100 pages or something crazy like that for these. But you can see the size difference here of this. It's a lot bigger. Something that I'm going to do before we start playing around with this thing too much is I'm actually going to wrap this in painter's tape, just so we don't end up scratching it up and making it look any less nice than it does now. So we'll go ahead and tape this thing up and kind of just go from there. We're going to go take a look at the car and look at what we have to do over there. I'm going to take this Grimspeed unit off of here so we can kind of just take a look at what we got going on. Always good when you got a bunch of condensation and water coming right out of your oil fill. Alright guys, Grimspeed AOS is out of the way. We're going to go ahead and start working on installing the IAG. So we'll go ahead and pop this bolt out, and IAG actually provides a longer one. So we'll go ahead and the bracket mounts over there just like this. You can see there's one 12 mil bolt, there's one 10 mil bolt right here. I just am putting that on there just for mounting purposes. Then we will go ahead and take the AOS. I have it all wrapped up, and I'm just trying to, at this point, get an idea of about where this thing needs to sit. So we'll take this back off and roughly mount the bracket to the AOS itself, and then try again and see where we're at. And then we'll need to test fit the intercooler to make sure the intercooler is going to fit. And then once we do that and that fits, we can go ahead and start installing it actually. Take this and so as you can see, this is the dilemma we're running into, is this hose wants to hit the AOS. So I need to set the intercooler on here and just make sure that we're going to be relatively close. If we had a little bit of contact here, it would not be the complete end of the world just because it's a silicone hose, but if we're talking this needs to be all the way over here, then this isn't going to work. Alright guys, for the sake of this argument, I'm going to tell you this isn't going to work. Just kidding. It's going to work, we're just going to have to get a little custom with it. So basically the problem we're running into is we aren't sitting far enough towards the firewall. And if we could just move back another 3 inches or 2 inches towards the firewall even, we'd be fine. So we are going to stretch this bracket. And to do that, we're going to have to do some fabrication. So for those of you that don't have one of these sitting in front of you, this bracket right here bolts onto the brake line bracket right there where that valve is, and then also right here would be one of your cruise control bolts. We're just going to basically just mark this out, and either I can fire up the plasma cutter or I can use a grinder. I'll probably end up just using a grinder because it's a pretty small part, and we're just going to go from there. So a lot of the times when you're doing these, you want to just obviously do as little amount of cuts as possible. So we'll take and do, Sharpie it is. I wasn't going to do this because it's not as precise, but for what we're doing here, it'll be just fine. Okay, so we have our basic shape here, which is what we were looking for. Mainly the only thing I even care about is this portion of this, so we can make sure we get that portion right. These bends we have to do here to break this, that's whatever, that's no problem. So we will grab a tape measure. So for, you know, in the case that we're doing right now, everything's obviously going to be flat because we're just cutting it on steel and then I'll break it afterwards. So we're going to want to just get a rough idea here on what our overall length is. So to be super accurate, we're going to burn 1 inch on the tape measure, because obviously when you get closer down to here, you're not actually being super accurate, or not as accurate as I would like to be. So we can come down here, and in this case we'll just burn 2 inches just for showing on the camera. And we're going to be looking at, let's see here, we are going to be looking at roughly 5/8, so it's about 9/16, but we'll call it 5/8 of an inch there. And then coming up on top here, we're going to be looking at, oh boy, come on, roughly 1 1/8 inches. So in total, what did I say, 5/8 and 1 1/8 inches. So we are looking at 3/4 or 1 3/4 inches overall here. So the actual, as far as bends go, you lose double the material when you bend it. So that's what we are losing overall there. So this material, I'm not really that concerned about that, just because. So we need to know that we're 1 3/4 inches past would be our number. So, oh hey, duh, I'm an idiot. So yeah, we also need to count in this small section, which is, sorry guys, this is I don't do metalworking as much as I used to. So we're going to call that 9/16. So for rough numbers, we'll call it a half. So 2 1/4 inches is how long this will need to be. So we got 1 3/4, 2 1/4. That's how long that'll need to be. Everything's good here. So we can go ahead and cut this, and I'm just gonna more or less probably just clamp this down on the table, and not my nice toolbox, but the table over there. And I'll cut this out, and then we'll talk about drilling it out and doing that stuff. Alright guys, you can see we got our new bracket here cut, and it's just a real rough bracket. We'll clean it up and make it look really pretty when we're done. So we're gonna have to do some braking here, and I don't actually have a metal brake. So we are going to do some braking with the vise. I mean, it's pretty simple, not super hard stuff to do, but that's what we're going to be after. So basically the thing we need to keep in mind here is, if you guys can see this, this is actually, this bracket, will sit like that. That is the only thing straight about this. And then this is actually a little bit longer. That's a little bit shorter. And basically that just gives it a little bit of a different angle. So we're going to try to manipulate that as much or as best as possible. Because all we were trying to do was extend it. Alright guys, so you can see we have our first bend more or less done here. You can see we got a bend pretty lined up as far as just that first bend goes. Obviously we'll never really be perfect here, but that's kind of what we got going for now. Okay, so now we got a nice little bracket made, extended some. So I'll go ahead and clean this one up and drill out some holes. Alright guys, there's the bracket all polished up and ready to go in the car. Looks pretty good. You know, you can see a little bit of sanding scratches on there, but honestly I'll put another pass on here and throw a little clear coat on it, and she looks real good. Only reason I ended up polishing it is just purely because just something different. Looks nice. There's a lot of other little polished bits, clamps and stuff under the hood, so I thought it'd be a nice little change from the black paint that we normally do. I'm really hoping that that bracket can push us in the right direction for clearing our intercooler. I have a feeling we're still going to just barely rub, but that's all right. So as you guys can see, we fit now. We barely have contact here. And I might even be able to make this thing tilt a little bit more back and be good to go there. So we're going to go ahead and take it back out and start working on, we're going to bolt everything down permanently, and then we'll start working on running all of our lines. Before we actually bolt this AOS in, this wire right here, this is for the cruise control. You can unwind it. It's just taped to the bundle or to the harness itself coming out of the car. And basically, you can take and unwind that thing and just get some extra slack. And I'm doing that just purely because once I bolt that AOS in, I'm going to attempt to relocate the cruise control module to over here. And just hoping that I can then retain cruise control, stretch that harness, and run it over to here, and then we can keep cruise control. So the AOS is sitting in the car for now. We're just going to start going through and getting some of this stuff ready. I highly advise that you go through beforehand and just take and literally just mark your hoses. You know, they give you the directions to, you know, what's what. You can measure it out really easy. Takes 2 seconds. You know, this is the breather hose, and you know, this is the valve cover, vent hose, and you know, this hose, this is the drain hose. That's the drain hose. You can see right there that my nice sticker didn't stick on. Drain hose, and then this is the other vent hose that would go to your actual PCV, that Y pipe. One of the first things we're going to start with is we're going to take and mark out 3 inches on this and cut it. So this is the 5/8 hose. It is 5/8 by 25 inches. So we're going to go ahead and mark out 3 inches. Okay, so now that we have a really crooked cut on here, I'm going to start off with finding your 5/8 clamps here, and we're going to take the 5/8 clamps, we're going to put 2 on here. There's a 5/8 90 that we'll take and we will shove in here. We're going to get that on and take your upper clamp, and we're going to go this way with it. Get that all clamped in place, and then you can actually take the rest of your 5/8 hose you have here, and we are going to do it this way just so we can. Okay, so then basically what you're doing here is you're making a section so we can actually hook the AOS up to the drain. Not anything super crazy here so far, but I will say that if you do not keep track of these parts, 100%, this job goes from being relatively simple to can be difficult for sure. So there you go. And then we know that this is the AOS vent right there because I have it labeled because I'm smart. Next, and this one will be the drain, and the drain we can go ahead and slap another spring clip on. You get this section of hose here, and God, I could have swore we had another section of this here that was a little bit longer, but oh well. Okay, so that's what she is. So we're going to take and you want to get that on there roughly halfway, leaving yourself a little bit of room to get another hose on there, and then take one of these guys and okay, so that's on there now, and then this lower one will do the same thing. So something you'll have to do to get these on again is, or to, now that we have that on there, we'll take and use a little bit of silicone lubricant, and you got the old super lube. So this, I have this rigged up here. This is our vent for our AOS. It will hook up here. This lower portion of this, I do have the PCV already hooked up to it. It's not actually routed to the car, it's just sitting on there. And then I have the coolant lines pushed off the side for now. So we're gonna just take and start with this setup here. And I will say that this setup, we're going to take and wiggle it down in here, but we're going to want to have the little elbow facing the other way. So that's basically what we'll do, is we'll take and shove that down in there, and you can see that nipple right there is where it's going to go. You will not have this. This is our oil pressure sensor. That's something I did. You will not have that on your application. There will just be a plug there. So you're looking for this one that's directly under the turbo. Now, just because I've done this before, you're going to want to pay really close attention to the routing and the location of your Ys, or where your Y comes in for your drain. And the reason I say that is because if you get it too close to this damn turbo, you will have absolute hell getting your hoses back on here. So you guys can see now how we have this routed. We have our second nipple over here, leaving us enough room to get that on here, get our plug back on there for the oil pressure sensor. Okay, so I went ahead and I slipped over one of the longer heat shields. I ran it behind here just to help hold it up and out of away from the turbo. So we'll go ahead and snip this and attach it, and that one is done. Alright guys, so one more thing that has to be done over here is these two hoses that come pre-assembled to the bottom of the AOS, they have to go to your turbo for coolant. So we will go ahead and remove this S hose right here, take one off the top, take one off the bottom, and then ideally this hose we will take and run nice and like this, and cut and attach it where we need it, and then this one will go more or less like this, but I'm going to take and zip tie everything down and nicely kind of wind it up here so it appears a little bit better than it does when it's just like that, like they recommend. So yeah, we'll go ahead and pull these hoses off here and start working on that. Okay guys, so one thing I highly recommend if you're watching this before you started this video, install the damn drain hose before you put this AOS in here. It's not that you can't do it, it's just not that fun to do it after the fact. So we're gonna take and this drain hose that goes to the bottom of the AOS is going to go right on this nipple right here that we had installed earlier. So how they like to have it routed is through this hole down onto that nipple. So we are just going to take off, you know, a couple inches here and then put a clamp on and slide it onto there, and then we will move on from there. So the next major step here is we're going to start hooking our vents up. You take the 74-inch hose, the half-inch 74-inch hose, and you hook her up right here to your, this is the driver or the passenger side vent, and you obviously have the same thing on the driver's side. Hook it up there, and I kind of got it working around going under here, and so I can mainly just have it here so I can zip tie it up, and then we're going to take and slide some heat covering over this and heat shielding, and so it doesn't get burnt, but it'll go and hook behind this. The main thing here is it's going to hook behind this air conditioning hose to keep it up and out of the way. And that's just going to be the best way to do that. All right, guys, so we have that passenger side, or the, yeah, passenger side vent hooked up. So obviously back here we'll need to take and give her the zip tie treatment, kind of just hold it up in place in some different spots. Tucks nicely under the air conditioning hose there, and we'll just have to hook a clamp up on this side, and this will be good for the vents. And then the only thing we'll have left is the actual returns that'll go back to the turbo inlet. Alright, so we're hooking up our vents now, and we're going to just roughly try to run this way, and hopefully be able to keep this looking relatively clean and tidy under here. So once you have this hooked up, we did the same thing with this. We added I added a 3-inch section here to kind of come up and give us a little bit of a better angle. And there we go. Looks pretty good. So yeah, the whole moral of the story here is just trying to keep everything away from the turbo best as possible, and then we'll hook that up there. So I went ahead and hooked that one up, and what we're looking for is there's a nipple right here on the turbo inlet, and we will be I actually have it capped off right now, and we will be taking the cap off of it and hooking this hose up. And just so you guys can get a good look of what I'm roughly talking about, it is that nipple there. Everyone, so it's the next day. We got everything pretty much wrapped up on that AOS yesterday. The one thing that we could not do is actually put the last hose, which goes from the AOS to the PCV port, on the actual intake manifold. So for this application, something that no one's really ever talked about, I guess, since I've been reading about this, and IAG, I didn't read anywhere that mentioned it. And this kit, you know, it doesn't actually come per se for a 2002 WRX. It comes for a 2004 to 2007 WRX or STI. And they say that you can make it work if you take off your cruise control, which is what we did. So something else that I've run across that is a problem is, so on the bottom of your intake manifold underneath your throttle body, you have this port. If you have a 2002, 2003 WRX, you have this port right here. And basically, this port, how it works is when there's vacuum, the hole in the end of it opens and allows ventilation to happen. When you have boost, it closes this and pushes the valve closed and seals off. And the big difference here is if you have this style, you just have a straight hose that goes down into your where your PCV hooks up on the actual block itself. There's no valve there. So on the 2004 and later models, you will have this style, which is, as you can see, significantly smaller, and it's a lot smaller, but it's got the same threads and would literally just go right in its spot. And the difference is, if you have this style, you have an actual PCV valve that goes down into the block on the 2004 to 2007 GD chassis cars, which obviously, when you get into the 06, 07 stuff, it's a different block and a different setup, but it's the same valve. And I would just like to say, Dave, if you are watching this, once again, your intake manifold is saving the day. I was so bummed I did not have this yesterday, and I went home last night and I was like, wait a second, I have an 06 WRX intake on the shelf. And so, Dave, thank you again. So we're going to go ahead and throw this on. I would highly suggest, if you're putting this onto your intake manifold, you're going to want to use pipe dope, or you could use thread lock or whatever, something just purely to seal this, so we don't have any boost leaks here is the biggest concern. So when you're putting this in, make sure that you seal the threads, because boost leaks will blow your motor up. We got everything installed here. This is a complete done deal. This was the last hose we were going to be hooking up, which we were talking about, that PCV valve that goes under the throttle body down here. So the only thing I want to note about this, these are two things that you absolutely have to know, is on this filter, you're going to find a arrow. And it's not so much of an arrow as much as it is a triangle pointing in this direction towards the throttle body here. And basically it's a filter and also a breathing. It's a breather in there that it makes it so it can only go one direction. So you need to make sure it's going this way. Now my recommendation is I would zip tie it down, because you got to remember you're gonna have a hot intercooler sitting right here. So kind of got to tuck it down in there. But otherwise, you can see, I just kind of take some zip tie some things out of the way, keep everything as much as you can away from that turbo. That thing is going to get hot. So keep everything best you can away from that turbo and that downpipe, and anything within the vicinity of it, you're going to want to make sure it's got heat shielding on it. Yeah, so that's about that. As of right now, we have no cruise control. We're going to be addressing that in the next video. You know, IAG says, and I'll tell you, if you were running their kit, you absolutely could do this. This one hole right there below my bracket, you could absolutely mount your cruise control there if you're running the regular bracket and you did not do a custom bracket like I did, because I have the Mishimoto top mount on this car. So we're going to be talking about relocating it over to here, making a nice plate to put it there, and making it look nice, and how we're going to go about doing that. So yeah, stick around for the next video if you guys want to see the complete install for the 2002 WRX and how to retain your cruise control, especially if you don't want to have to cram it down in there. I mean, obviously, if you have the space, awesome, but you guys can see I don't have really any space in that specific spot, and it's just going to be more of a pain than it's worth it. And more or less over here, there's nothing on that side wall of the engine bay, so should be a good spot for it. We'll make a nice little plate for it and paint it up and get it mounted there. So if you guys are making it this far into the video, please like and subscribe. Stick around for the next one, and after we get this sucker installed, we're gonna go make some hits in this car and put some big horsepower down and be doing it safely. Got rid of that grim speed that wasn't working for us, and now we're on to the IAG that is the good stuff. So thanks for watching, guys, and stick around for the next video.